driven by multiple factors. There's human factors such as conflict, rapid urbanization, encroachment through agriculture, and also natural shocks such as earthquakes, flooding, climate change. So actually, one of the things that we were looking at was how we could use the archives to look at how sites photographed 100 years ago, what condition they were in the present and the current, and start to understand how these sites have been affected by conservation, management, and these kind of natural and human factors that may be detrimental to them. In 2018, Dr. Abdul Azim, photographed here with Professor Cunningham at the Oriental Museum, he undertook a scholarship at Durham where he looked at the Taxila photos in the archives and then went back to Taxila to take photos from the same angles of these photographs to start to see the transformation of these sites and see what had changed. So at various sites, we can see some of the conservation and the state that is in. We could also see changes in monument over time. So here, the stupa losing its dome in how it's currently looked after. But then also issues such as encroachment to sites, the buildup of buildings around these very fragile sites. Because again, as we know, it's not just the standing remains in these areas, there will be subsurface heritage that needs protecting in the surrounding area. We're also keenly aware of global challenges, and we're also starting to see how we can integrate analysis and looking at these original photographs to see how we can link those to their reports, to look at how we can see how these can be used to work towards some of those global sustainable development goals. And at the moment, we've got a project looking at water in the Kathmandu Valley. And again, here, looking at some of those archives which deal with water and seeing what information we can glean from that, which can help us in our multidisciplinary studies to help preserve heritage and communities for the future. And with that, I'll say thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher Davis. An excellent presentation. These are the things we got to know today. And the book brought up by you was very useful for us. The second speaker of today is Mr. Tony Joseph. Tony Joseph writes on ancient Indian history and is the author of Early Indians, the story of our ancestors and where we came from. It's a very popular book, which has been translated into 6 Indian languages, including Tamil. The book won the Tata Literature Live Book of the Year award in 2019 and was featured as a non-fiction book of the decade by The Hindu. He also co-edited The Indians Histories of a Civilization, a book of essays by over 100 of South Asia's foremost scholars and domain experts. He has been the editor of Business World, associate editor of Business Standard, and features editors of the Economic Times at different times. He got into this field because of his interest. He's currently working on a sequel to the Early Indians. You can say that the Early Indians was a one single book with 4 chapters, because this is a way we learn. Simply 4 chapters: first Indians, first farmers, first urbanites, and last migrants, the Arya. By putting this particular very clear title and giving a narrative in the context of the genomic studies and the multidisciplinary inputs, he made a phenomenal understanding. In fact, actually, this is a book which we give as a presentation to many. Thank you very much. I invite Tony Joseph to make his presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balakrishnan, for the very generous introduction. And I thank also the Department of Archaeology of the Tamil Nadu government and the Roja Muthaiya Research Center Dr. Sundar and Dr. Shivanandam for inviting me to this landmark function. I'll be using the next 30 minutes or so to speak about what I think are some questions that remain 100 years after the discovery of the Harappan civilization. I am not an academic, so I must say at the outset that what I share are merely my thoughts as a close observer. I have no new findings to announce, but only a few questions that I hope will provoke thought about some of the popular or common assumptions. I must also put on record at the outset my deep debt to Padma Shri Airavatham Mahadevan, whom I had the occasion to meet more than once during the writing of my book, Early Indians, and whose insights were crucial to that book, as well as to what is to follow. The discovery of the Harappan civilization was a watershed in many ways, as we all know. For one, it put a firm archaeological basis for taking the Indian civilization back to at least the 3rd millennium BCE. For another, it made it possible to understand the different stages of the early Indian civilization, including the way the different parts of it fit together. And the discoveries of population genetics in the last decade have increased the resolution of what we do understand, especially the fact that the ancestry of the Harappan population is today present across the subcontinent and in a very significant manner. That, however, leads us to the question how that came to be. How did the ancestry of the Harappans come to be shared on a subcontinental level in such a strong manner? Over what periods of time did that happen? And to what extent is this linked to both the expansion of agriculture and the spread of languages? This is a subcontinent-wide question that requires attention, though in what follows, I'll be focusing only on southern India. Mr. R. Balakrishnan's works, especially The Journey of a Civilization and The Port Route, addressed many issues connected with the migrations from the Harappan civilizational area to the rest of the subcontinent. This speech will come at the issue from a couple of different angles. The heart of this talk is about tracing the chronology of the spread of Proto-Dravidian in South India alongside the spread of agriculture and its connection or not with migrations from the Harappan civilizational area. Such a chronology of the early development of the Dravidian language family in the south will solve many problems and also integrate better the evidence we have from archaeology, linguistics, and genetics. There are two parts to this story. One, the migration of pastoralists from the Harappan civilizational area before the mature period of the civilization began, and two, post-Harappan migrations that happened after the civilization declined. So let us begin with part one. The common or public perception has been that a large number of Harappans migrated out of the northwestern region of India only after their civilization started declining around 1900 BCE, and then mixed with populations in other parts of the subcontinent, thus explaining the current spread of Harappan genetic ancestry. But there is a problem with this explanation, because if it is correct, it will have two implications for southern India. One, that this particular migration after 1900 BCE had little to do with the expansion of agriculture in South India, since agriculture was already well underway in this region by then. Two, it may also not have had anything to do with the first spread of Dravidian language family in the region either. This is because the earliest vocabulary of Proto-Dravidian which is ancestral to all existing Dravidian languages, as reconstructed by eminent linguist Professor Franklin C. Southworth or Dr. David McAlpin, shows a society engaged in animal husbandry with some knowledge of agriculture. If indeed it were the urbanites of the Harappan civilization who brought Proto-Dravidian to the south for the first time after their civilization declined, then the earliest vocabulary of Proto-Dravidian, one should expect a fair sprinkling of urban words, not only pastoral ones. I will quote from the paper of Professor Southworth and Dr. David McAlpin, published in 1983 with the title South Asia, Dravidian Linguistic History. The reconstructed vocabulary of Proto-Dravidian reflects a society engaged in animal husbandry with some knowledge of agriculture. Words for sheep, goat, cattle, along with verbs referring to driving and grazing animals, words for herd, flock, shepherd, etc., indicate the importance of herding. No specific words for grains are reconstructible. Thus, it is unlikely that these people were sedentary farmers at this stage. Quote ends. In his paper, Proto-Dravidian Agriculture, Southworth makes a further distinction between early Proto-Dravidian and late Proto-Dravidian. He says the following, quote, thus, while early Proto-Dravidian can perhaps be described as partly agricultural, that is, practicing animal husbandry along with gathering and processing of food plants, but with very few identifiable crops, late Proto-Dravidian shows a variety of crop plants, many of which are still grown in the area today, along with the necessary technological development for full-time agriculture. So as I said earlier, if indeed the people who brought Dravidian languages to South India were Harappan urbanists, then the common vocabulary of the Proto-Dravidian reconstructed from the existing Dravidian languages should have shown a fair sprinkling of urban words. That it doesn't suggests that the spread of Dravidian languages happened before Harappan urbanites reached the region. Who could then have spread this spread of Dravidian languages, and when could this have happened? The answer to this could lie in the sequence and spread of agriculture in southern India, because one of the most common ways for a language to spread is with the expansion of agriculture. When a nomadic or hunting and gathering people settle down to do agriculture, their population starts growing dramatically, leading to migrations that in turn lead to their language spreading to new areas. So the question of who spread Dravidian languages in southern India could come down to who spread agriculture in the region. In South India, the earliest evidence for pastoralism of the kind early Proto-Dravidian reveals comes from northern Karnataka and southwest Andhra Pradesh from around 2800 BCE. That's a couple of centuries before the mature period of the Harappan civilization began. So how did this pastoralism get going? In a 2006 paper, Agricultural Origins and Frontiers in South Asia, the archaeobotanist Dorian Q. Fuller says domesticated animals were introduced to peninsular India from the north. According to him, people in peninsular India, perhaps in the eastern hills between the Krishna and Godavari rivers, going by botanical ecology, had already taken to cultivating two kinds of small millets and two kinds of pulses, mung bean and horse gram, like the basic crop package of barley and wheat in northwestern India. And this happened sometime between 3000 BCE and 2300 BCE, according to Fuller. They had domesticated these millets and pulses from locally available wild varieties. The earliest evidence for the integration of this seed package with domesticated animals, which is essential for the spread of agriculture. And when you say domesticated animals, you mean mainly cattle, but also sheep and goat. The earliest evidence for it comes from ash mounds, or large mounds of ash formed by the burning of cow dung, dating from around 2800 BCE. Fuller considers this ash mound tradition to be possibly the outcome of interaction between local cultivators and immigrant pastoralist foragers. The evidence for the introduction of sheep and goat from the north to the south is clear, since these have no wild ancestors in the south. The case for the introduction of zebu cattle is less clear. Even though zebu cattle were first domesticated in northwestern India, archaeologists Alchin and Alchin have made a case for their separate domestication in South India, but based on rock art depictions. This argument of theirs is not supported by archaeological bone evidence, so the issue still remains unresolved. Since the zebu cattle domestication in northwestern India is proven, unlike its case in the south, and since the import of sheep and goat from the north is not disputed, the greater probability is that domesticated animals in general were brought to the south from the north. The question that is interesting for us then, who brought domesticated animals from the north, introduced them to the south, and thus completed the full agricultural package and set off an agricultural expansion and perhaps the spread of Dravidian language family? It couldn't have been Harappan urbanists at a time when the mature Harappan civilization stage had not yet begun. But it could possibly be other residents of the northwestern region who were still pastoralists and who probably spoke a Proto-Dravidian language like the Harappan urbanists. Even today, there are pastoralists in the northwestern region of the Indian subcontinent, like the Brahuis of Baluchistan, who, by the way, also speak a language linked to or classified as Dravidian. There is a possibility, therefore, that some of these pastoralists may have brought cattle and goat herding to South India around 2800 BCE, and that when they did so, they were also the first to bring a Dravidian language to South India, and also probably the earliest to spread northwestern or Harappan ancestry in the south. Recent genetic studies have shown that the Harappan ancestry is a mixture of ancient Iranian and First Indian ancestry. First Indian meaning the original out of Africa migrants who could have reached India before 50 or 60,000 years ago. It would have been the first Indians who were experimenting with millets and pulses in the eastern hills between Krishna and Godavari rivers too. A look at the climatic map of India will show that a pastoral migration of this kind is feasible. There is a savanna zone, an expanse covered in grasses, that runs from Gujarat and Rajasthan through the central Deccan and all the way down to South India along the western side of the peninsula. This would have been a perfect route for pastoralists to take. The ash mounds, the earliest monumental features of South India, that are found all across South Deccan Plateau, could then be a ringing celebration of the coming together of the full agricultural package and the beginning of an agricultural revolution in southern India. The ash mounds are accumulations of animal dung at ancient penning sites that have been episodically burnt. Anthropologist Peter G. Johansson describes them as sites of ritual and ceremonial activity within the context of Neolithic agropastoral production. Quote ends. In the paper First Farmers of South India, archaeologists Boivin, Fuller, Corisettar, and Michael Petraglia say a remarkable number of ash mounds were created during the Neolithic period in South India, and their ubiquity in a range of contexts and phases suggests that they had a central role to play in the Neolithic belief system. These authors say that ash mounds are not related to a particular phase of the Neolithic, but rather a particular phase of the history of individual sites. To quote, that is, many settlement sites actually appear to begin with the creation of an ash mound. The practices that led to ash mound creation are then subsequently abandoned after perhaps several hundred years, though settlement continues and probably becomes sedentary. What this strongly suggests to me is a community of people with certain common rituals and practices expanding into new regions and sites as their population expanded, and recreating their community using traditional practices. So we now have two sets of evidence suggesting how agriculture spread and what the early language of these agriculturalists could have been. Archaeological evidence, including that of ash mounds, shows how an existing package of seeds came to be combined with domesticated animals around 2800 BCE, how that caused agriculture to take off in southern India. Reconstruction of the vocabulary of the Proto-Dravidian language shows that people at this stage were in the process of transition into being fully agricultural or clearly agricultural. In other words, expansion of agriculture and that of Dravidian languages in southern India seem to have gone hand in hand, and that began happening before the mature Harappan period began. That takes us now to part two of the story, the post-Harappan migrations, and the mark they have left on Dravidian linguistic history, especially in Tamilagam, which perhaps also explains the standout nature of Tamil in the Dravidian language family firmament. Part two. What we have discussed thus far does not mean that urbanists of the Harappan civilization did not migrate to South India or other parts of the country. After the decline of the civilization, about 1,000 years or more later, that is after 1900 BCE. But whenever they arrived in South India, with perhaps a more urbanized version of the Dravidian languages, they would have been building on an existing foundation of Dravidian language presence in South India. We can perhaps speculate that the references to Agastya of the Vedic texts, who moved to the south from the north, or Agathian of ancient Tamil literature, who led a migration of Velur and other tribes from Dwaraka to Gujarat to the southern peninsula, Dwaraka in Gujarat to the southern peninsula. Pardon? Yeah, I'll come to it. They would have been building on an we can perhaps speculate that the references to Agastya of the Vedic texts, who moved to the south from the north, could refer to this later migration of people from the Harappan civilization. Because of a Sanskrit myth that portrays Agastya as having been born in a water pitcher, who is born from a water pitcher, who is also known as Kumpayoni, meaning born from a jar. Scholar Airavadam Mahadevan uses this fact to identify Agathian or Agastya in a Purananuru poem by Kapilar, Purananuru 201. In the poem, says Mahadevan, the poet narrates that 49 generations earlier, an ancestor of the Velur tribes ruled over Tuvarai, a city surrounded by soaring bronze walls. Kapilar also records that the Velur arose in the Tadavu or jar of a northern sage. This extremely important historical reference has remained obscure as the medieval commentator did not identify the northern sage and misinterpreted Tadavu as the sacrificial fire pit. Quote ends. Quote again, I have attempted to set the record straight, says Mahadevan, by identifying the northern sage in Puram 201 with Agastya, Tadavu with his celebrated water pitcher, and Tuvarai with Dwaraka of the Gujarat region. As Mahadevan points out further, quote, the story of the southern migration of the Velur from Dwaraka under the leadership of Agastya is narrated by Nachinar Kiniyar in his commentary on Tolkappiyam. Tolkappiyam was written in the centuries around the beginning of the Common Era, and Nachinar Kiniyar was a 14th century commentator. According to this legend, the gods congregated on Mount Meru, as a result of which the earth tilted, lowering Meru and raising the southern quarter. The gods thereupon decided that Agastya was the best person to remedy this situation and requested him to proceed to the south. Agastya agreed and on his way visited Tuvarapadi or Dwaraka and led the descendants of Nedumudi Annal, Vishnu or Krishna, including 18 kings, 18 families of the Velar and the Aruvalar to the south, where they settled down, uh, clearing the forests and cultivating the land. The sage himself finally settled down on the Podiyal hill on the western Ghats. The fact of Agastya's leadership of the Velar clan rules out the possibility that he was even in origin an Aryan sage. The Ventar, Velar, Velalar groups constituted the ruling and landowning classes of in the Tamil country since the beginning of recorded history and betray no trace whatever of an Indo-Aryan linguistic ancestry. Quote ends. Mahadevan also uses the myth of the Agastya being born in a jar to connect him with the Harappan script, where the image of a jar with handles and a tapering bottom is by far the most frequent sign, accounting for about 10% of the sign occurrences. Mahadevan also suggests that the name Agatyan or Agastya originates from the Dravidian word Agatyan, related to Agatar or Agator, meaning those inside the fort, which would be quite an appropriate name to give a Harappan leader who lived inside one of the citadels. He quotes from Kalitogai, ancient poetry, the word Agatar, meaning princess of the palaces, from Purananuru, the word Agator, meaning those inside the fort, and from Tolkappiyam, the word Agathon, to mean the king inside the fort. All of this suggests that Agatyan or Agastya is a title or a descriptor rather than a personal name. With Agastya figuring in both ancient Tamil legends and ancient Sanskrit legends in different ways, it is therefore possible to imagine Agatyan or Agastya as the name or title of a leading member of pre-Aryan Harappan polity who or which was known to the Aryan community in the north. In the early centuries after the arrival of the Arya from the Eurasian steppe, we have evidence from the Rig Veda to suggest that there were significant interactions and exchanges between the newcomers and the settled pre-Aryan, possibly Harappan populations. There are Rig Vedic verses that thank chieftains of non-Aryan tribes for their help in battles and for their contributions to their sacrifices. And there are even Rig Vedic poets who have non-Aryan names. For example, in Rig Veda 8:46-32, the composer Vasa Asvya thanks the chieftain of a Dasa tribe, Balbhuta Taruska, for gifting him 100 cattle or horses. Rig Veda 6:45-31 has a heartfelt Danastuti, a hymn in praise of a donor, to Brubhu, who bears a distinctive non-Aryan name and who seems to have helped some of the Arya tribes in their fight against their enemies, Panis, who are described as niggards, probably because they did not contribute to sacrifices. But some non-Aryans may have gone beyond being merely allies in battle or donors to Arya sacrifices. There are some instances where non-Arya were accepted into Arya society, even as composers of hymns. Professor Thapa today mentioned Dasiputra Brahmanas. Therefore, one way to reconcile the legends of Agastya in both Sanskrit and Tamil compositions is to see him as a pre-Aryan native Dravidian language speaker, community leader, or title holder who was familiar to the Arya community and who arrived in the south after the Harappan civilization had declined. That would account for his presence in both northern and southern legends, and also his connection to the region of Dwaraka in Gujarat, which is a late Harappan site. Mahadevan concludes his paper titled Meluha and Agastya this way, quote, "A section of the ruling classes, that is, of the Harappan society, did not stay on, but migrated under the leadership of the Agathiyar clan to South India, where they founded the early historical kingdoms," quote ends. The prominence of the Agastya legend in Tamilakam in relation to other regions of the south could then suggest that this region was particularly important in the post-Harappan migrations from the north to the south, just as the early agricultural expansion was centered on northern Karnataka and southwestern Andhra Pradesh. This could possibly be because prime agro-pastoral lands in Tamilakam may have been less populated at this early period relative to similar areas in upper South India. As Mahadevan points out in his paper, quote, "While the Tamil Agastya shares basic myths of his northern counterpart, namely miraculous birth from a pitcher and southern migration from north across the Vindhya, he is given a very different role by the Tamil tradition. Here, Agastya is so totally identified with Tamil that he is termed the Tamil Muni or Tamil sage, and Tamil itself is named after him as Agasthyam. Agastya wrote the first Tamil grammar called Agathiyam, which is not extant now but is mentioned in ancient texts. Even today, Tamil Nadu has the largest number of Shiva temples dedicated to the Lord of Agastya, Agasthyeshwara, a feature almost unique to Tamil Nadu. If Agathian or Agastya indeed wrote the first grammar of Tamil, whether he is a singular person or one of a line of people who held that title over time, it could be similar in context to what Panini did for the Vedic language. Panini composed the grammar Ashtadhyayi at a time when the spoken language of the cultural elite had deviated considerably from the ancient orally preserved texts of the Vedas. This is the context that provided the necessity for a grammar that would bridge the old and the new, while standardizing the language then in use. If the post-Harappan migrants brought with them a version of Dravidian language that had deviated from the language spoken in Tamilakam, that could explain the context and the need for the creation of a grammar for the language spoken in Tamilakam. We, of course, lack sufficient knowledge to say when this could have happened. That would also probably explain the special nature of Tamil and Tamil linguistic history. It is clear that Tamil stands out from other Dravidian languages in the early nature of its development as both a literate and literary language. As Airavada Mahadevan points out in his paper, From Orality to Literacy, the earliest Tamil inscriptions in the Tamil Brahmi script may be dated from about the end of the 3rd century or early 2nd century BCE. The earliest inscriptions in Kannada and Telugu occur more than half a millennium later. The earliest extant Tamil literature, the Sangam works, are dated, even according to conservative estimates, from around the commencement of the Christian era. The earliest extant literary works in Kannada and Telugu were composed almost a millennium later. This is despite the fact that the Brahmi script reached Upper South India, that is Andhra Karnataka regions, and the Tamil country at about the same time during the 3rd century BCE, in the wake of the southern spread of Jainism and Buddhism. The difference was that the script was used to write in Prakrit in Upper South India, while the script was even modified to be able to write in Tamil in Tamilagam. This was not for lack of literary skills though. King Hala of the Satavahana dynasty, for example, composed a highly acclaimed anthology, the Gada Saptasati, in about the 1st century CE, when the heroic poems of the Sangam period were being composed, except that Saptasati or Saptasai was composed in Prakrit, not in Telugu, the spoken language of the people of the region. Mahadevan attributes this striking difference to the fact that both Karnataka and Andhra were incorporated in the Nanda Maurya domains, which led to Prakrit becoming the preferred language of governance and that of elite usage. Tamilakam, on the other hand, probably because of its location at the extreme end of the southern peninsula, remained independent, and the Jain monks who reached the land had to find ways to change the Brahmi script to write in the language of the people. But perhaps a part of the reason is also the greater attention that the language received at a very early age, as the legends related to Agathian suggest. The groundswell of literary creativity that began with Sangam or heroic poetry continued with the epics Chilapadikaram and Manimekalai, and later the Bhakti poetry. The other Dravidian languages caught up, of course, and by late 1st millennium CE or early 2nd millennium, they were on their way to creating new benchmarks for creativity and literary production. After having led the spread of agriculture and of the Dravidian language family itself, Upper South India would once again come to the fore, with Sheldon Pollock describing Kannada text Kaviraja Marga, written around 875 CE, as the first text in South Asia to self-consciously theorize the relationship between vernacular and cosmopolitan ways of literary practice, an indication of another regional language coming into its own after Tamil. When you keep this history in mind, it is not surprising that the Dravidian language movement started in Tamilagam. But to make the story of the Dravidian language and Dravidian society pan-regional, the early history of the domestication of plants and the spread of agriculture and language, starting with Upper South India, has to be integrated with its history during the period of heroic poetry or Sangam literature, and with the later history of literary achievements in Kannada, Telugu, Malayalam, and other languages. That is probably a story that is waiting to be written. There is a model that can be kept in mind while creating this new history of Dravidian languages and people in the south, that of the epic Chilapadigaram. Chilapadigaram becomes an epic of the entire Tamil country by locating its story in all three parts of Tamilagam that were ruled by the Muvandas, or the three crowned kings, Chola, Chera, and Pandya. The epic begins in the port city of Pumpuhar of the Cholas, moves to Madurai, the capital of the Pandyas, and finishes in Cheranadu, the domain of the Cheras. The new history of Dravidian languages and societies will have to be written in a similar spirit, taking all of the domains of Dravidian languages and leaving nothing out. It will start with the agricultural expansion and the spread of languages in Upper South India, that is Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, move on to the heroic poetry and bhakti poetry of Tamilakam and the society they portray, and then take in its sweep the later literary and other developments of the rest of Dravidian languages and societies. It will be less a history of dynasties and more a history of a people, people's movements, and a language family. A project of this kind would be a fitting consequence of this centennial seminar. That this event in Chennai today is the only major international conference that has been organized to celebrate the discovery of the Harappan civilization, as far as I know. Yeah. One more session. Yeah, I will end. It's significant. It tells us that the responsibility to keep alive the history and spirit of Harappa falls on all of us. That the heritage of Harappa was forgotten for over 3,500 years until John Marshall and his team turned up, tells us how easy it is for history to be lost when the political situation changes. That would have taken us to part 3, to how to see the attempts being made today to rewrite school textbooks. But for lack of time, I will have to leave it here now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We fell short of time in the morning inaugural session itself, which we are trying to make good. So sorry for the interruption. Now I think probably we can take one question or maximum 2 questions, because the second more session is there. Maximum 2 questions if they come from that.
Hello. One question to Mr. Tony Joseph.
Sir, yes, sir.
So one question to you.
Yeah.
How does your theory of migration in the post-Harappan phase square with the other theory of Kumarikandam? Because there's one view that Tamil language and civilization initially cradled in Kumarikandam, Tamil Nadu and South, that landmass extending up to Australia.
Yeah, but that was what shall I say? A mythological theory that was popular a long time ago. It has had no academic purchase at any time that I can think of. So I think the evidence that has accumulated over time does not support such a story.
Is it audible? All right. So just one. Sorry. Previously, the lack of, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the lack of urbanized vocabulary in Indo-Aryan is one of the primary reasons which has been used to reject or reduce its probability as a candidate for a language which is spoken in the Indus civilization. If a similar situation exists in to some extent for Dravidian languages also, where they lack advanced urban vocabulary and they're primarily of a pastoral nature, will the arguments against Indo-Aryan proposals have to be reconsidered?
No, because you're saying the earliest, when you're talking about the pastoral words in the earliest, what is it, the Proto-Dravidian language, the ancestral of all the, you're saying that this happened not in an urban context. You're saying it happened especially in a pastoral context. Because the people, if you assume that it came with the people who brought the domesticated cattle, then they themselves are pastoralists. So there is no contradiction between saying that the agriculture and pastoralism spread by a pastoral people, and therefore that the language that they reflect, the Proto-Dravidian language reflects a pastoral vocabulary. The contradiction in the Aryan language is a real contradiction if the argument is that they were both the creators of the Harappan civilization and also had a vocabulary that is rural or pastoral. So then that contradiction, there is no contradiction in the second case.
So I did not refer to any contradiction. I didn't say that there was a contradiction.
Yeah.
My question was more like, given that the pre-mature Harappan period, the same Dravidian languages, if we claim that they diversified before and spread, and that is used as an explanation for why we cannot reconstruct high urban words to Proto-Dravidian, um, a similar explanation could apply to the Indo-Aryan case. I'm not saying that it's a contradiction. I'm asking, does it weaken the argument or no against Indo-Aryan languages?
I'm asking, which argument are you referring to? When I say the contradiction, it is the argument that I'm referring to. But once you say what the argument is, and then the contradiction will become clear.
It's just any proposal that Indo-Aryan languages were found at any were a spoken language in any stage of the Indus civilization.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm extremely sorry that I'm a bit of violating, but this question cannot go unanswered the way you would like to know. Your question, if we understand properly, that in the Dravidian languages also, the urban words, which is lacking the way we are basically saying that Indo-Aryan it's lacking. So then you are showing that as a contradiction. So I would like to quote Asko Perpola, and he has quoted the quote, Kotai, quote, fort. This is a word used in most of the Dravidian languages. The places are absolutely in the northwest and north. Is the quote word is basically from the Dravidian, and whereas the Sanskrit equivalent for that is the Durg. So which is a later addition. So like that, it's not a fact that urban words are not there, because urban word nagar for the town may be from the Aryan origin, but the fact remains that ur means is basically a settlement. The same thing, if it is an ancient, it is called Tollur or Mudur. If it is a bigger Ur, that means town, it's a Perur. So that means from the Ur as a Proto-Dravidian root itself, Ur, Perur, Tollur, Mudur, Puttur, Palayur, all these things are coming. So it's a letter on. I'm very, really sorry. I'm extremely sorry that I am supposed to moderate only, but it cannot go unanswered.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being, for answering the questions with patience. We now come to the end of the second session of the conference for today. Thank you, sir. We will be breaking for tea, and I kindly request the audience to reconvene in about 15 minutes' time for the start of the third academic session, as we are already running behind the schedule. Thank you.
Indeed, this is an honor for me to chair a session of Dr. Selva Kumar and Professor K. Rajan. Both of them happen to be the pillar of not only Tamil Nadu archaeology but Indian archaeology. If there is something which is not sensationalizing but sanitizing the Tamil Nadu archaeology, it is done through these two pillars of Dr. Selva Kumar and Professor K. Rajan. If we get scientific data from Tamil Nadu, not sensationalizing them, that is because of these two balanced figure. They do balance the subject much better than anybody else in Indian archaeology today. And Dr. Selva Kumar happens to be the alumni of Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute, where I did study, and I had the honor of sharing the next room of him when he was doing his PhD and I was just doing my master's. And Selva Kumar is at present the head of the Department of Marine History and Marine Archaeology in Tamil University, Thanjavur. He is the coordinator at the Center for Indian Ocean Studies in the same university. He was a faculty member in the Department of Epigraphy and Archaeology in the Tamil University, Thanjavur. He completed his doctoral and postdoctoral from Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute. Since then, he was invited by many of the leading institutes across the globe, and all of us have been fortunate enough to know him and call him at dead end of the night, Selva, we have this problem. If there is somebody who knows from prehistory to ethnography, again, it is Selva Kumar. It is my honor to invite Dr. Selva Kumar to present his lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Alok. I would like to thank Tamil Nadu State Archaeology Department and Roja Muthaya Research Library and Dr. Sundar and Dr. Sivanandam and Dr. Balakrishnan and Dr. Rajan for inviting me to make this presentation. My topic today is Harappan India, contemporary cultures of Harappa in the Indian subcontinent. That is the focus of my research. How to okay. So the focus today is on not on Harappa but the contemporary cultures. My lecture is mainly for popular consumption, but I am raising three academic issues here. That is the focus of my presentation today. We have been talking about Harappan civilization and the people generally across India, they know about Indus civilization or Harappan civilization, but there have been numerous cultures across India and they have really contributed to what is India today. Multiple languages, multiple cultures, and what we call otherwise as unity in diversity. So that is why I have decided to focus on these cultures, and apart from that, we need to look at these cultures from a pan-South Asian holistic perspectives, and not these cultures as something silos, but something as some kind of dynamic and interacting entities. Also, one of the academic issue that I wanted to focus is this definition of archaeological culture. We have been we have been having problem regarding the definition of archaeological culture. So that I am trying to focus, and also I am trying to cite some of the flaws in the conventional 3H system, and I am trying to use the Thinai concept of Tolkapia as an alternative,
as a value add, not really as an alternative, as a value add to the 3-8 system proposed by C.J. Thompson as part of the cultural history approach. The next academic issue that I am raising is related to the periodization of Indian history. There are issues in the periodization of Indian history. And I am not focusing on linguistics and also genetic data and the text correlation and migration, which are beyond the scope of my paper. When we look at the archaeological sources, I would always suggest two alternatives, plan A and plan B. Sometimes I feel material culture should be looked upon purely from material perspective, which I call as plan A. That's what I am presenting. Plan B is part of interdisciplinary approach where we will be using textual sources and trying to interpret archaeological material, living cultures, languages, and tradition. Already, Tony Joseph has made my presentation simple by citing some of the South Indian Neolithic culture and related issues. Yeah. Coming to the Harappan civilization, we all know about the Harappan civilization. It is said that this civilization covers more than 1.5 million square kilometer area. There are 5 major cities, 1,400 plus villages and other settlements, multiple phases of chronological development, with the mature phase reaching between 2600 and 1900 BCE. It is a very important civilization, and there is no doubt about it, and it has contributed to Indian knowledge system. And many of the traditions and technology that were created as part of the Harappan civilization, they continue in the later period. We can look at the Harappan civilization from two perspectives. One, from a horizontal perspective that I am presenting, how Harappan civilization had interacted with the contemporary cultures, what were the other contemporary cultures that existed. Second, the vertical or temporal perspectives, how Harappan traditions continue in the later period, how there are some references in the literature, Tamil literature and other literature which can be correlated to the Harappan tradition and technology. Similarly, we have evidence of Carnelian beads and graffiti. Dr. R. Balakrishnan has worked on the similarity of the place name. Now Dr. Rajan is going to present the similarity of the megalithic graffiti and the Harappan, script, so-called Harappan script and other elements. So here we are dealing with verticality, but my paper focuses on the horizontal aspect, the contemporary cultures of the Harappan cultures. So you all know this. Actually, Kenoyer has tried to create some kind of integrated chronology for the Harappan cultures. Normally people see Harappan culture as a monolithic entity, but if you look at it, it has multiple kind of developments. We have Sorath Harappan, Sindhi Harappan, and so many categories. Some of these are very distinct, and he has classified this into localization era, integration era, and regionalization. And then we have later Harappan culture. So we should not view Harappan culture as a single entity. It covers much broader space and time. These are the settlement pattern. You can see the major cities like we have Dholabira, Harappa, and Mohenjo-daro, and Kanveriwala, Rakhigari. These are some of the settlements more than 60 hectare in size. So you can look at its distribution. And here also you can see the different cultural regions, different territories based on, this is based on Posel and Kenoyer's data. We have, apart from these Harappan, we also have other cultures, late Harappan culture, or sometimes described as a Chalcolithic culture, about which Rajesh is going to present. So we are actually seeing diversity of cultures in this area. We have Gagar Hakra River Basin, and we have diversity of cultural developments in this area. Then they have divided something as late Harappan, about which Kenoyar and Prabhakar and several others have done categorization. I'll not be focusing on that. So I wanted to give a brief introduction. Now, my main focus is that we need to look at the cultural development from a pan-Asian perspective, and we need to take into account there have been foragers, hunter-gatherers across South Asia existing during this period. Suppose if we are dealing with the period between 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE, I try to argue the entire period should be seen as one kind of time slot. So now we have a conventional classification into Paleolithic, Mesolithic and Neolithic. Some of these southern Neolithic culture is seen as a Neolithic. Then we have Chalcolithic, we call Harappan as a Bronze Age civilization. And we also talk about late microlithic site as part of Mesolithic. I think this causes confusion. I think we need to have some kind of new chronological periodization wherein all these terminologies can be modified to give sufficient space for multiplicity of cultural development in a same time period, for which I am suggesting that we need to have single time period based classification. Suppose if we call period 1, period 2, period 3, that kind of classification can be done. This can be done at a span South Asian or Indian subcontinent level, whereas we can very well have regional chronology. That is one of the points that I wanted to highlight. The second point I am raising is the history of foragers or hunter-gatherers who have been occupying India right from the early period. We have references to these communities in the Ashokan inscription as Adavikas. Even in the later inscription, we have numerous references, and they have been living in some of the areas, and they have been categorized into tribes in the colonial period. I feel that these communities should be given due representation in the history of India. Whereas we try to focus mainly on the major civilization, completely ignoring these so-called margin. That is one of the point I wanted to highlight. So when we look at the Harappan cultural domain, we have these kinds of cultures existing in other part of India. We have Neolithic culture of Kashmir Valley, where excavations have been conducted in Bursahom, and that is more or less contemporary with the Harappan civilization. They have identified certain fish bones from Bursahom, which may indicate some kind of relationship with the coastal area. Similarly, they have also some of the skeletal remains having similarity with the early Harappan Kotiji kind of way. So definitely there existed some kind of relationship which we need to investigate. Then we have Neolithic culture of the Ganga Valley and Vindhyan Plateau, Vindhyan area, where several studies have been conducted, and that is one of the important area. Then we have Gujarat Chalcolithic and late Harappan cultures. Then we have Ahar Banas Kayatha culture in the western central Indian region that is considered to have supplied copper. And then we have several other cultures where people suggest possible relationship with Harappan culture. Similarly, Deccan Chalcolithic culture, sometime this is also linked to some of the cultures and migration. I'm not touching the migration because I feel it is a very difficult area. Then we have Southern Neolithic culture, which also falls in the same bracket as that of Harappan. Then we have Eastern Indian Neolithic site, and recently some of the sites excavated in Orissa, they have given early dates. So, similarly, we have Northeastern Neolithic cultures. They also fall within the same period, and as far as Northeastern Indian Neolithic is concerned, we have certain issues related to chronology. So my main focus here is that whenever we look at India's past, we should not only focus on the Harappan culture, we should also focus on the other cultures, because these cultures have really contributed to what is India today, what we call as unity in diversity. That is one of the main point. Here I have taken the map from Sarkar and Shinde, and I have tried to modify, and I have tried to indicate the hunter-gatherers in between. How whenever we talk about Chalcolithic, we conveniently ignore other cultures, and this is where we need to look at this particular, all the cultures that were contemporary to the Harappan culture, and this can give us some idea of how some of these crops which came from Africa, they could have come, and also similarly certain elements of animals and plants, they could have come to different region through interaction. Already Tony Joseph made a point with regard to this, but I am not getting into that. As I said already, my focus is mainly on the contemporary culture, not on the other kind of migration and other issues. Then we have Mesolithic sites. So we have a lot of microlithic sites across India. Some of them are dated from as early as 45,000 BP to the historical period. So they are also equally important. Some of these microlithic sites could represent the settlements of the hunter-gatherers. I think we need to take that also into account. And because of the conventional perspective of periodization and seeing these cultures as separate entities, we try to treat them as separate. So it is our perception that guides us in classifying culture. So we try to go to the field only looking for Neolithic. Sometimes we take the hero stones as a separate category, and then we recreate rock art as a separate category. We take them out of the context. This is where I argue that we need to have a regional approach to archaeology, wherein we look at all the archaeological remains of a particular region to look at the cultural developments, both in the short term and long term. This point already I made. We have a lot of evidence for coexistence of forest people or hunter-gatherers in the later period. We have V.N. Mishra, who has studied the site of Bagor in Rajasthan, where we have he has found evidence of copper objects which are suggested to indicate the connectivity between the Harappan culture. Similarly, Central India, we have Jerome Jacobson, who have documented several microlithic sites. And then coming to Kerala, we have Tenmala, where there is a date of 5120 BP for a Mesolithic context, which is also very important. Then we have Nallamalai Hills, where Dr. M.L.K. Murthy has documented microlithic sites, hunter-gatherers coexisting with the southern Neolithic context. And similarly, we have evidence in Sri Lanka where these hunter-gatherers continuing up to 3000 Kal BP, that is 1000 BC. Then Shirin Ratnagar and Sudeshna Guha, they have highlighted how these hunter-gatherers were also part of the Harappan cultural system. This is a very important point. Similarly, Professor Padaya, when he is working on the Neolithic sites of southern India, he has repeatedly highlighted that the need for focusing on these regional cultures. And we have, as I said already, we have reference to Adavikas. Even Yasovarman's inscription, it talks about the forest dwellers. We have clear evidence from anthropological context of these communities living in different parts of India. So the central argument is that we need to give due representation to these forest people while reconstructing the entire history. Now I'll come to the southern Neolithic culture, where I'll be talking about some of the work that I have done. Already Tony Joseph has presented the Southern Neolithic culture. I'll be mainly presenting the site of Molapalayam, where we have done some recent excavation. I'll quickly go through this. And here, we have a lot of ash mound. Tony Joseph already highlighted about these ash mounds and the Neolithic settlements, which are dated to 3000 BCE to 1200 BCE. We located the site of Molapalayam near Coimbatore. And if you look at this map, you know how these early domestication areas within India. This is a map from Banham and Petrie and Fuller. Here also Fuller's another map where he talks about the early domestication. I'm not going to talk about the migration, which I think is very complicated. And these are some of the Neolithic site in Mysore. And this is from Dorian Fuller, who discusses about some of the animal and plant domestication in this area. This is an ash mound. We have an ash mound section. I'll quickly go through the excavation at Utnur by Alchin. We have several sites where we have, these kind of polished stone axes, and they are being worshipped at several sites in Tamil Nadu. And we have this kind of tradition where people even today send their cattle through fire. This is common in Karnataka. In Tamil Nadu also it was practiced earlier. We have these Neolithic tools lying across these kind of grooves. These kind of engravings, they are common across South India. We also have these kind of engravings, and Payambali is an important site excavated by S.R. Rao as part of ASI work. I'll skip through. We excavated the site of Molapalayam. Our research has extended the Southern Neolithic culture as far as Coimbatore. We explored, we identified the site of Molapalayam in the Noyal River Valley, west of Kodumanal, where we noticed a similar kind of geographical context, what is found in Karnataka and Andhra. We excavated the site, we found interesting evidences. We found 3 human skeletons. One is adult middle-aged lady and 2 children, 6 to 7 years, 2 to 3 years old. We also found a lot of pottery. We find these kind of storage pits and lithic artifacts, and a lot of evidence for grinding wild as well as domesticated animals. And also we found a lot of plant remains. And more importantly, we found terminal of pyram shell in a context dating to 1600 to 1400 BCE. That definitely indicates the connection with the coastal region. And we also found a bead of Oliva sp, 2 beads. They were found nearby the adult female skeleton. And this is Oliva sp. We interestingly found another shell pendant made of the lamellidans, which is a freshwater mussel. We also found a lot of botanical remains studied by Satish Nayak from Deccan College. We have all these varieties. Some of these are African crops according to Dorian Fuller. We found ceramics and so many other materials. We also found terracotta headdress. And this is from this season. We interestingly found a lot of these shell pendant-like objects, microliths and animal horns. And these are the datings that we have. I wanted to just highlight that how there are so many sites where we have not really explored, where we have not done any kind of scientific dating. So when we look at that evidence, it clearly suggests that the regional cultures of India need to be explored properly. Now I am moving to the next point of 3H system. What are the issues in the 3H system? Most of us work with the cultural history approach, where we try to visualize cultures in terms of Neolithic, Chalcolithic, Iron Age in a kind of neatly, neatly carved out categories. We try to perceive the sites also from that perspective. So I found the Thinai concept expounded by the Tolkapiyar, who talks about Kurinji, Marudam, Ullai, Neidal, as the 5 landscape, that is very important. The Thinai concept is basically eco-poetic concept that talks about the various cultural landscape of the Sangam age or early historic period, somewhere around between say 300 BCE to 500 CE. The literature talks about the various categories. Now, what is that we can get from this concept to understand the 3H system? Here, when we look at the narration, there is a description of hilly region where shifting cultivation takes place. Then there is this Mullai or forest tract where Neolithic kind of pastoral communities existing. Then there are Naidal area where there are coastal communities, fishing communities living. Then we have Marudam agrarian or deltaic communities. Then we have Palai, dry semi-arid region where hunting gathering takes place. The main idea here is when we are trying to view cultures, we cannot expect that culture always lead from Mesolithic to Neolithic, Neolithic to the Iron Age or Neolithic to Chalcolithic or other. Here, Tolkappiyar actually created this conception primarily for describing the reality of the Sangam period to make it convenient for the poets to compose their poem. So probably he was creating these categories, creating this text for the convenience of the poets in the academy to help them to write poems, possibly. And what this suggests is that we have all these kind of elements coexisting at the same context in the early historic period, somewhere between 300 BCE to 500 CE. So this gives an idea that we need to relook at these 3H system that we have been conventionally using, saying that all the cultures need to transfer from Mesolithic to Neolithic. It is not necessary. So if you look at some of the context, the poems clearly suggest people who were living in the hill areas, they were doing shifting cultivation, and sometimes they were also involving in hunting. So what really happens is, after the Neolithic period, the cultural transformation took a different kind of direction, for which Tolkappiyar gives a very ideal situation based on the narration of what he found in the early historic context. So I am trying to use that to understand that how these cultures could have developed, what really could have happened after the arrival of the Neolithic, how the communities could have transferred. There were some communities probably they transformed into pastoral and community. Some communities did not transform into pastoral. They tried to adopt shifting cultivation by exchanging the agrarian product from the agro-pastoral communities. So this kind of diversification really happened. That is being narrated in the early Tamil literature. And this is where I am trying to argue that Tamil literature could be a very useful source for understanding the cultural diversity. And that could be used for interpreting the cultural development. And we need to, I seriously believe, we need to dislodge these categories of Neolithic. What is the difference between Deccan Chalcolithic and the Southern Neolithic? Why we have to categorize that as separately? Now there are several scholars who have been categorizing this as early agro-pastoral communities. But just because we don't have copper, why should we call this as a separate kind of cultural history stage? Because many scholars, I know, they have been arguing, they have dislodged these categories, but these terms are still persisting in the academic literature. It is causing confusion. At one time, when in the historical narrative, we write Indian history, we move from Harappan civilization to Vedic culture and go into a narrative, and then we push all this Neolithic, Chalcolithic culture to a prehistoric. This happens in many of the textbooks. Some of the textbooks, some of the research scholars have really understood and they have done away with. Still, we are still carrying an old baggage that puts a lot of restriction on describing these culture. This is where I found the categorization created by Kenoyer in the case of Harappan civilization is very useful. So this kind of cultural development happens according to the ecological niches that we understand, and this is where we understand the verticality and the linearity. And the verticality is presented in 3-age system. The linearity of the cultural landscape is presented by Thenai concept of the Tolkappiyar's exposition. This is where I feel it is very important. I already mentioned we have issues with this cultural periods as long-term average of material cultural cake layer. This has been pervading some of the archaeological textbook, some of our understanding. I think these needs to be dislodged. Recently, an interesting book has been published by Peter Johansson and Bauer, where they have been talking about these kind of cultural periods as, kind of black boxes. They talk about dislodging these categories. I think this is a very important argument where we need to relook at. Even if you, this is a classification based on Mark Kenoyer. Here also you can find he has dislodged most of it, but still he talks about, this is from one of his papers, where he talks about Mesolithic and Microlithic 10,000 to 2000 BC. Then we have food producing era. This is where I feel we need to dislodge some of these categories and try to give due representation to these microlithic communities. And we also need to take our research from a regional perspective. Right now what we are doing, we are going for an Iron Age site, we are going for a Neolithic site, we are going for a Harappan site. We are not trying to do a very regional kind of category. We pull out rock art as a separate category and create, take it out of the context and look at this, look at it or try to analyze it. This is where I try to argue we need to have a holistic regional approach where we can get a better understanding of the archaeological record. This is another point that I wanted to highlight. This is something very important, as already Kenoyer has done it. So he has tried to incorporate some of the southern peninsular Indian cultures as part of the broader tradition. He has done in several areas an excellent integration, and this is what I am trying to argue. So what are my main points? I feel that we need to relook at and rethink the concepts such as urbanization and civilization and cultural periods, and similarly migration and dispersal. Migration and dispersal, I think it's very complicated. It is not a simple one-to-one relationship. You find certain symbols here, certain symbols there, and correlation is very complicated. And I am trying to adopt a very strict approach. That is why I did not touch literature or other sources. Similarly, chronology-based categorization and regional cultural sequences that we need to do. We will do the chronology-based categorization across broader South Asia. And then when it comes to cultural sequences of Harappan or other areas, we'll have regional cultural sequences. That is where I am trying to argue that if we talk about Harappan India, you say, let's say 3000 BCE to 1300 BCE, treat it as a single kind of time bracket at a meta level, at a South Asian or Indian subcontinent level, where we try to do away with the Neolithic and Chalcolithic, call them as early agropastoral communities. And similarly, the category of Iron Age, that also we need to look at, and this has been discussed by Peter Johansson and Andrew Bauer, and I found their argument very interesting. And that is where I am trying to ask, should we shift to neutral chronology based period? So rather than Neolithic, Bronze Age and Chalcolithic as linear sequences, we need to think out of box to come to some kind of categorization. And Thenai concept of Tolkappiyam, as I said already, it offers very interesting probabilities what could have happened to these kind of Mesolithic or so-called microlithic forages after the Neolithic period, how these communities transformed. This is one area where we need to look at. And whenever we look at Indian history or Indian culture, when we try to focus only on Harappan civilization, people tend to think Only that exists. But if you look at the complicated nature of this Varna category, Varna caste category of India, and completely distinct languages and culture, we can very much understand that some of these complex developments took place in the late prehistoric period. So there is some problem with our perception. Unless we correct these kind of categories, we'll be looking for similar kind of sites. So I try to argue that we need to have more interdisciplinary and problem-oriented regional holistic approaches are very essential. Another problem I found is this scientific dates. When we talk about several cultures, we don't have many scientific dates. I found several conflicting dates, and many of these dates have not been calibrated. So looking at the chronology, I think we need to do a lot. As far as southern India is concerned, several excellent publications have come. Dorian Fuller and Ravi Korisettas and their publication excellently presents the chronology of southern Neolithic. Similarly, Tamil Nadu State Archaeology Department now dating several sites. So this helps us to build a nice chronology and understand these cultures better. Already I told you this rock art and megaliths, how these kind of fragmented categories can create confusion. And finally, I am coming to this point. Why do we need to research on these cultures? Why research Indus? Why research Southern Neolithic? How communities have interacted with each other and the environment that need to be understood. And this can help people to better understand their roots and history. It is part of their heritage, and we can use this as for heritage education and also for sustainable tourism. Similarly, contemporary social use, that is another point highlighted by Dr. Sudeshna Guha, and political implications. I am not going to elaborate this. Similarly, how unity in diversity and pluralism emerged in India. This is something important. I think the research and studies on the past can be used for a positive future. That is why I strongly feel that our research should not only focus on major civilization, we should also focus on the other kind of cultures, and this can be very much highlighted from the fact that Dr. Nayanjot Legari in the beginning, she said martial and the other. So I am talking about the other. That is where you can contextualize my presentation. Similarly, Tamil Nadu State Archaeology Department and Dr. Rajan, they have been trying to, look at the cultures, and they have got early dates for Iron Age, but still they are very hesitant because they are re-looking at. So when we look at all these kind of approaches, we try to understand that there is so much research to do, and we need to re-look at the way we study cultures. Only by improving our theoretical framework, we can understand culture. My main focus today is for the public, and somebody raised a question about Kumari Kandam, and similarly, our research should not only focus on Indus civilization and Kumari Kandam. There is a lot of things in between. Most of the time when we go for field work, people talk about sculptures and other inscriptions. Sometimes they'll be sitting right on top of the stone and then say that there was a stone, we don't know where it is, and they'll be sitting right on top of a stone with inscription. They'll be using it for washing clothes. Therefore, I strongly feel that we need to research the cultures within India, and then we also need to have a broader maritime perspective. Sometimes we have to study cultures from Afro-Eurasian perspective, because we cannot interpret Harappan culture just by focusing on northwestern India. As Dr. Nayanjot Legari pointed out, how the connection with the West that was brought out by these early researchers. We need to look at the cultural connections. We are now talking about Indian Ocean and other research areas, and I would always suggest that we start our research right from a micro level, from a point provenance, and from there you move into multiple level from a global perspective. With these few words, I finish my presentation. Thank you. My presentation was mainly for the public, and I would, in the process, I also wanted to highlight 2 or 3 methodological issues, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Dr. Selva Kumar. Had we not heard your lecture, we would have certainly missed today's how, like encyclopedia, each encyclopedia, because it keeps on updating every minute. That's what he did. He updated all the lecture of today till now. What lecture has taken place, he updated in his lecture. That brings what is Selva is Selva. Okay. Coming to the next lecture of Professor K. Rajan, if I have to introduce Professor K. Rajan, it's like showing water to sea. Yet, as a protocol, I need to introduce him. But if we do not know Professor K. Rajan, then certainly we do not know Indian archaeology. With that beginning, Professor K. Rajan is a renowned Indian archaeologist, known for his extensive research and contribution to the field of South Indian archaeology. Again, his contribution to the marine archaeology is nowhere less. His work primarily focuses on the ancient history and cultural heritage of Tamil Nadu and surrounding regions. Nevertheless, he worked in Dwarka too. Rajan has conducted numerous excavations, including Kodumanal, that have revealed important findings about the early history of Dravidian civilization, including insights into the Sangam period, early urbanization, and the socio-economic structures of ancient South India. He is the author of several books related to archaeology, including early writing system. Currently, he is associated with the State Archaeology Department and working on the graffiti marks of Tamil Nadu, the book which we saw got released in the morning. And other than Professor Rajan, this paper is co-authored with Dr. R. Sivanatham. Sivanatham is a person of few words, and let it remain as a few words. If there would be sometime in future, looking at the work he has done, I'm sure one day some dissertation will take place on his work. With these words, I invite Professor K. Rajan.
Thank you very much. At the outset, I would like to thank Raja Mutaya Library, Dr. Sundar, for giving this great opportunity to express my views on behalf of the team. So I am only team head here. I am not the complete work I have done. If any credit that is there because of this graffiti marks, that credit goes to the team members. If there is any pitfall and anything is there related to the graffiti, that I will take the complete responsibility. With regarding to the Indus script, we will like to thank the government of Tamil Nadu for generously funding this project. And I also thank my co-author at the outset itself. So whatever that geographical area, if you have considered, we have taken a very small geographical area of the Indian subcontinent. In this small geographical area, we are having the issues in India. We are having 3 issues we have taken. One is that Indus writing system, and we are having a graffiti writing system, and also Brahmi writing system. That in the Brahmi writing system, we are having 2 things. One is Prakrit Brahmi, and second one is Tamil Brahmi. And in this name that they have given, sorry, what is the back? In this graffiti Indus writing system and the graffiti writing system, there's no 2 such writing systems. Actually, this is created by archaeologists, really speaking, because the same contemporary society is using the script as well as the graffiti. If that sign is found on the seal or identical sign found on the pottery, that has been designated as a script. The same script is written on a ceramic or any other contemporary society, that is been declared as a graffiti.
But in the South Indian context, all the writings that could not be undeciphered, that has been declared as a graffiti. So that way, we are having a two system. And really, there is only one system. Either we have to accept it as a sign, or we have to say that is all graffiti. So we have to differentiate these two things first. So, with regarding to the metal object or whatever the object which we are already told you, but in the case of Tamil Nadu, we are having the complete graffiti marks on pottery, on metal, on inscription. Everywhere we are having that complete graffiti marks. So, and there we are having a sign or script. First, we are getting the seal without any animal figurine or human figurine. After that, we are having that script and animal figurine or human figurine. Then only we are having a script. These three stages, whether it is chronological control, we don't have that data. So whatever the data we are having, we can be able to differentiate only that with only animal with script, or without animal, only script. So in which stage we are having these graffiti marks? Because none of the graffiti inscribed potsherd is having any animal or any human figurine. Whether the from last stage, this graffiti has been evolved, that we have to understand, or we have to again study that part. And the writing system, that is a big issue for me. The problem is when we are collecting a data, we are having the issue of whether we have to consider that graffiti marks as a right to left or left to right. In Indus writing system, it has been widely recognized as it is a right to left. But the same Indus Valley, which way the graffiti has been written, that has not been discussed. Simply they say that only the seal, that in the script, has been written from right to left. And when I look into that, our graffiti marks, or whatever they say, the right end of this part, both the way they are reading now. The Dholavira, very famous, the gateway label has been written from left to right or right to left. That also we have not been completely decided. So, and in the entire Indian subcontinent, all the script, ancient script or ancient inscriptions have been written from left to right only. If they have written from right to left, when we have changed from that part to another part. So we have not having any evidence. When we have to move from left to right, that we don't know. $15,000 inscribed potsherd, highest in India. None of the state or the entire Indian subcontinent you put together, that also will not match to the small geographical area where we have documented. Maybe in future the inscribed potsherd may come up in the excavation, then that time the data may change. But as on today, if you taken into the account of this, you can see here and also here, everywhere you can see that it has been clearly see the overlapping clearly indicates that it has written from left to right. None of the graffiti has written from right to left. If you take by script, we are not getting in the Indus. But the only seal that we are getting at Anakote, probably a by script. The top one, we are having identical things we are having in Indus Valley. And the same thing we are getting in Sri Lanka, we are getting in Tamil Nadu, the entire South India, we are getting such symbols. But down, it is written as clearly Ko-Veta. So that is a Brahmi. So this, when they started using the by script, and when they moved from this graffiti to Brahmi, That we have to decide. The as on today, we are having more than 70 radiocarbon dating, of which nearly more than 32 radiocarbon dating goes back to pre-Mauryan. And the earliest date so far from Sivagalai with the Tamil Brahmi inscription that goes to 685 BCE. So the majority of the data which shows that around 7th century BC, or what we call it Mahajanapada period, that time itself the people have moved from graffiti to Brahmi script. So before that we are having only graffiti. And if you take it, not only that one, not only in Sri Lanka, in here also we are having a Brahmi and graffiti, cone you are having a graffiti, and again Sandadan you are having a graffiti. So everywhere at the end of that Periyan Satan, it is written there, again you are having graffiti. Not only in inscribed potsherd, if you take it in the inscriptions, at the end you are having a graffiti. The same identical graffiti you are having in a inscribed potsherd. It is not coming from only one site. It is entire Tamil Nadu. We are having such evidences. And not only that, if you take it a rock art, in the Kilvalai rock art, you are having the same graffiti which are having a parallel in the Harappan script. And also, this is one of the longest one. We are having this graffiti continuously on a bangle. So that way, it is a right type of writing system that existed here. Then we are having a chronological issue. If the graffiti has come from north to south or south to north, that I don't know as on today, because all the radiocarbon dating so far we have collected from South India, particularly from Tamil Nadu, it is contemporary to Indus Valley. So it also we are having 2500 BC, that I will show you that one. So the Indus writing system and the graffiti writing system of South India are contemporary in nature. Then only we are having the Brahmi writing system. So if you take it, then what is the date of this contemporary? If you are claiming that it is contemporary to Indus, where is the scientific date? So first we have come across the Mangadu site. We have excavated in that site. There is more than 500 megalithic monuments were there. In that, close to this is Mettur Dam. Whenever the water level goes down, particularly during the month of May and June, thousands of megalithic monuments will get exposed. This is the only natural conservation we are having as on today. Otherwise, all the brick industry would have been removed all these megalithics. So thanks to the dam. So next, on excavation, we got this sword. We have collected a sample from the sword and we have dated this material, and we come to know that this is the date, the Telugu sword. The date goes back to almost 1300 BC mid average value. But when the analysis we came to know that this is high carbon steel. This is the first striking our mind directly, hitting our head, telling that if the steel itself is 1300 BC, then what is the age of iron? So high carbon steel itself we are having that date. So we have started searching for the Iron Age. Then luckily the excavation is in progress at Keelamandi. Dr. Victor Jnanraj is doing that work. And there we are having a graffiti on the pot. So we thought that if we are knowing the date of this grave, we can also know the date of the graffiti also. So we have radiocarbon dating has been done. It has come, the date has come, we are having the date of 1789 or 1600 BC if a mean value. So that means the date of the iron goes back and also the date of the gravity also clearly has given. Then we are having, first time, we are having a date for sarcophagus. In India, first time, we have dated for sarcophagus that goes back to 17th century. Then we got next excavation we have conducted Mailadumpare that I have excavated long back. Again, we thought that yes, Dr. Selvakumar said that you can't do any periodization as a generalization, but after that vertical periodization will not work. The problem is that within Tamil Nadu, the northern Tamil Nadu, you are having a microlithic, Neolithic and Iron Age, whereas in southern Tamil Nadu, we don't have the Neolithic. It comes microlithic directly to Iron Age. So this is a big issue. That moment you say we are having thousands of megalithic monuments, so how to differentiate? So that's why the periodization has become a big issue. So Mailadumpare site has given the date of 2172. So, so slowly from 1600 to we moved back to 2000 BC for Iron Age. Then comes your Sivagalai, and also we have done the Archaeological Survey of India as well as Tamil Nadu State Archaeology Department has done the work there in Sivagalai and Adichanallur. Both the sites, we are having a plenty of urn burials, but habitation, though we are having hundreds of acres of urn burial, we don't have habitation. But luckily, that there was a tank nearby, that in the tank, there was some repair work has to be carried out. So they have drained out all the water. Below 1 meter, that clay, we are having the habitation. So Archaeological Survey of India excavated the habitation, and also Tamil Nadu State Archaeology Department has excavated that. Though we are not having a date for urn burial for entire Tamil Nadu, so we thought that let us go for dating, radiocarbon dating for Adichanallur habitation site. So that date, so that the date, you can see that that date goes to 2522 BCE. So from 2000, we went back to 2500, where you are having all the iron objects inside the urn burial. All the urn burials are having iron object, and some of the urn burials are having height in bronze. Then, when we are having up to Neolithic period, what is it, Paleolithic or Microlithic or Neolithic or Iron Age, till that Neolithic period, we are having limited settlements. We have it identified on the ground. And when Iron Age comes in, you see the settlement, every 5 kilometers you are having one site. At least minimum you are having more than 3,000 archaeological sites have been already identified, bigger sites. And if there is any gap, there are certain gaps here. It is not due to the non-availability of the settlement. We have not yet to do the survey. So we have to do the survey for another 10 years or so, then we can fill the gap. So for the 20-30 years, we are continuously exploring not only Tamil Nadu State Archaeology Department, Archaeological Survey, Tamil University, Madras University and Pondicherry University, and several institutions and individual scholars have been fully involved in identifying the archaeological site. So that has accumulated data clearly indicates that there is no gap in the Tamil Nadu land, and every 5 kilometers you are having one settlement. And Lesniki has told that all these people are nomadic because you are having only burials. In the burial, I am getting 10,000 semi-precious stone. I am getting gold object. I am getting 2,500 carnelian beads. Instead of being urban, I want to be a even nomad. So that much of cultural material you are getting, even in Adichanallur, if you take it into the, for example, so they are not nomads. Actually, we have failed to identify the habitation site. So now re-surveyed all the area and we have identified all the habitation sites. So that way, if you take it a graffiti, in that case, all the sites are yielding a graffiti. Nearly 140 sites are yielding a graffiti marks. All the sites. If you take this one, there is no cultural gap. So completely the entire Tamil Nadu, you are having Tamil Nadu, you are having a graffiti marks inscribed words available in all the archaeological site. And if you take it into the account, till today, that means every day the data is accumulating. Every day excavation is in progress. So as on today, we are having 15,184 inscribed parts heard. And out of from 140 sites. The same way, we are having 1,512 in Tamil Brahmi inscribed potsherd. So if you take the entire Indian subcontinent, put all the data together, also will not match of 1,500 inscribed potsherd. Where this literacy has come? Who taught the man sitting near Chennai? And who taught that script, the man sitting near Kanyakumari? Which type of institution, educational institution is having, how it has the script and the language, or that educational system has spread to this region is yet to be decided. So whatever the may, as on today, we are having in the Kodumal alone, we are having more than 500 inscribed parts. None of the site, whatever we call it Mahajanapathas, the Mauryan Empire, the great Mauryan Empire, we are not having. Even Maurya Panchmar coins we are not having inscribed potsherd, which has been issued by the king or by the trader. That itself is not having. So why this region is having this much of value for this language and script? So they have, as you know, the great scholars like Asko Parpala, Irada Mahadevan, and several scholars have listed the entire science from Indus. So we thought that since we are having a 15,000 inscribed parts, we also should have some sign table. So that sign table, we are there are basic signs. Only we are having so far, whatever the data which we are having, we could able to see 42 signs. That is called base signs. And small variation is there, some of the signs that we will put it as a variant. That I will show you some of the pictures. So 544. There are two signs are coming together, three signs are coming together. That comes in almost 1,521. So that we call it as composite signs. And you can see there is a plenty of, every sign has been documented, and each sign, we have documented and given a number for each sign. This is sign number 1. So then we, after creating a sign table, we compared with the Indus signs. You can see that you are having a Kalibangan, several sites, identical signs are there. You can see here, then when we are having identical sign, we are having two base signs. That means all composite signs. And we are having in Kalibangan also, and we are having in Kort also, we are having in Kodumalal also. Not only in, if you take it another sign, that is available in several sites like Amri, Navadoli, Faruke, Sanur, and Pudukkottai. Not only one site, in several sites, identical signs are coming. What is the purpose of using identical sign? It is not coincidental. So there is some purpose for that one. Somebody would have been conveyed certain message out of this sign. Then what is called base sign? So that we have taken as a base sign, first one. And if the two base signs are coming, then we'll compute composite sign. Then down one is like a Asogan Brahmi Ma, like thing is there, that is also base sign. Then if it is tilted on the left facing or right facing or down facing, that is we have taken as a variant of the same base sign. And also when we are having two base sign together, then we have taken as a composite signs. So when we are having a small arrow mark, if you take out that arrow mark, or small horizontal stroke or vertical stroke, that is not separately coming. It is always associated with one particular base sign. So in that case, something like a diacritical marks, what we are having, that we have identified. So there are several signs are there. Each number is given for that. This number 1 means that sign number 1. That is variant of that one is called given, like there are 13 variants are available. So each sign is having variant and each sign also having composites. So here the 7.17, 7 is a sign number U-shaped sign, and also 17 is the symbol. So that way we have compiled the entire graffiti inscribed potsherds. So for example, if I am excavating on place on one grave, if we have draw all the parts that found in that particular grave, you see you are having identical symbol in all the part. So something like a clan symbol or whatever you call it. So not even, and if you take another grave, it is having another type of sign. So whenever I am having on a particular sign, particularly in Kodumanal and Porundal, immediately I can tell to my student, sir, this symbol has come, you will get this much of carnelian beads, or where they will keep, that also we can identify. And also if this particular sign is coming, 4 vertical sign and 1 horizontal sign, you will not get a single carnelian bead, but you will get a bronze object, where they will keep in front of the portico on the floor level. So it is associated, this symbol is associated with a community or ritual pattern. So it is not a mere symbol. It is some importance is there given to this symbol. And if you take the sign, which sign is highest value, you can have the number 2, sign number 2, and also sign number 30, 31. So we have compared the entire signs. And also from which side is having more number of signs, but this data may be distorting because from a single side, like a Tulukarpatti, we are having close to 5,000 inscribed potsherds. So naturally, the data, the bar will rise. So therefore, this data may not be very perfect, but still we could able to know which side is yielding more number of inscribed potsherds. And we have prepared concordance. First, I have, as I told you, I have clearly taken from left to right. So I have taken that first sign, even if I taken this sign, this is the base stem. If any sign prefixing another sign that is given at the left, and another any sign that is coming at the right, or that is suffixing, that type of concordance we prepared. And also you can see that on the next one, only comes in the front, never comes at the end. Some of the jar symbol in Indus Valley, the jar symbol always comes at the end, it is considered as an un. But for me, it always comes at the front. That is why I am telling that the right to left and left to right, that again we have to look into that, and we have to see that how best we can interpret these inscriptions. So this is only I am example due to the paucity of time. And you can see that one Lothal and also Navadadoli and also from North Arcot and also these regions. And you can see these are composite. But the first one, Bagalil, Chalkodikar, Prakash, and also Kunnatur, and also Rangpur and all in Panchmark coins also. So we are having these type of symbols, whether it is individually found as a base sign or in a composite form. You can see that one, and also rock art also we are getting. So it is the entire South India we are having this type of inscribed potsherds. You can see that some of the symbols from Kodumal alone I have given, and you can see the another one, the comb like symbol. So these type of symbol we are getting several in our documentation, like a symbol we are having bow and arrow. It is above facing up, left, right, all that same thing we are getting in Indus Valley also. Then we are having that U shape, that jaw symbol, double parallel. You can see here, in this here, you are having U shape. Again, nearby, you are having another sign. That sign always comes at the right end. One always comes in the front only. So in the concordance, you will get tomorrow, we will keep 9 volumes or 8 volumes for your scrutiny in front of this our seminar hall. So you can go through all that, whatever that academic debate or criticism, you're most welcome. And here, on also we are having the same identical U symbol. And if you take it now, we have prepared 100 plates. That I think we have given in the book form. So you can go through that. We have also given number also. So here, sorry. Here, you can have V shape. Same thing we are having in the graffiti as well as in the seal. Not only seal, in even Harappan pottery also. Here, it is a sign. There, it is a graffiti. So these things we should not, we should either you should call it as a sign or we should call it as a graffiti. So these are the left side, yes, you are Harappan, and also from this all. So only a limited picture I am showing. So there are several such signs are identical. You can see the fish sign and also from our inscribed potsherds. From different sites we are given. And here also. So that way, since we don't know what language it is, and we don't know what the name of the script, also we don't know, we have given a name as a graffiti. Whether it is a Proto-Dravidian or Aryan or Indo-European, none of the word we use. That's why we are given the title, a morphological study. Even we have never said that it is a linguistic study. So that way, first I am throwing this in front of you for your suggestions. From whatever the suggestion, any constructive criticism, it will welcome. We will change whatever the way we are doing our methodology also. Okay, particularly this symbol, just for example, I have shown this one, sorry. This one, how it could be identical? It is a very complicated sign. So here only, and also the same thing on the top one. I have taken one from this Kodumanal, and also Kalibangan also there. And you can see here also, different sites are available. So under this thing, finally, what we learned out of that morphological study, that means that study clearly indicates that 60% of the graffiti marks that found in Tamil Nadu had their parallels to the script found in the seals. And quite interestingly, more than 90% of the graffiti marks of South India and the graffiti marks of Indus Valley civilization that found on the inscribed potsherd goes in 90%. Whether the seal is meant for elite people, these inscribed potsherd are meant for a common man. That's why you are having a more parallels in the inscribed potsherd, less parallel in the Indus, because it is a trade oriented. I think Ansumali Mahabharata, easy has to express it. So that way there is a difference, we could able to do it. And I think even my future generation is there here, younger generation is there, they are going to accumulate the data, and one fine morning, someone will decipher this script and they will get $1 million also. Okay, thank you very much for giving this great opportunity. And as I told you, it is not of my work, it is a team work. The credit has to go to the team and all the Archaeological Survey of India, Tamil Nadu State Archaeology Department, Tamil University, Madras University, several individuals has extended their help. Whatever they are in their collection, they have given. That way we have documented. We try to document in future also with all this data. We try to interpret If not, we will leave it to the younger generation to interpret, come with excellent information. Thank you very much for the passionate hearing.
Hardly there can be a word to thank Professor Rajan today. Having said that, as I started, I said how balanced he is. He himself said, having the data, the amount of data he has, he says, I'll put the data on the table for you to verify and I'll change that. Very few people would say that. And we take, in archaeology, we take help of GPR to understand if there is a structure, and the GPR is never 100% right. But if you want to interpret Tamil Nadu archaeology on the basis of graffiti, you call Professor Rajan. He will tell if this is the symbol, you will not get the bead, you will not get this gold. It is more accurate than GPR today. Thank you. Now the floor is open for question and answer. I understand you would have a number of questions and we have time. Yeah.
Doctor, if you could, these days, excellent speeches. I am very happy about it. My small suggestion is, if you can use software program, pattern recognition software are already available. If you could make use of them, you can put all these on a very scientific basis. These were done already. See, your biometrics can be easily identified. Softwares are already available. See, the fingerprints are already very quick, you can do. Now, AI also has come. Put them together, you will be able to make a real quantum jump in understanding between what you have done and what you will be doing. It's an excellent work. Thank you very much.
We have a question here. Can someone please pass the mic?
No, any student, if they want to ask in any language, Kannada or Telugu or Hindi or English, there's no problem at all. But you should ask questions. Okay, that is more
The
important.
first speaker spoke about the Harappan culture, Harappan identity with the contemporary culture. You have to compare from 3 dimensions. One is cultural identity, linguistic identity, genetic identity. Must find out how this kind of various identities are come closer. And then only we can say finally that this particular culture is more closer to the Harappan culture. I want to know whether, how do we do the future, how do you study?
Yeah, I think already I told you, I adopted Plan A, in which I am just looking at material culture. To look into this literature or language is complicated. I would like to add what Dr. R. Balakrishnan and Dr. Rajan, they did. Their work refers to verticality, which means how Harappan knowledge system continues in the later period. For example, we have Cornelian beads, technology, where Airavadam Mahadevan also used Sangam literature like what Dr. R. Balakrishnan does for the contemporary surviving names. That should come in the verticality. So I did not focus on the verticality. When we want to reconstruct Indian history, you take into the contemporary existing situation like languages. We have Austro-Asiatic, we have Dravidian, we have Indo-Aryan languages. I said I did not get into that. I think it's a very complicated business. Similarly, genetic studies, I said I did not get into it. But people are very curious. This is a position which Shireen Ratnagar also says, why we should identify culture. So I am not trying to go into that. I did not take up that particular problem in my research. To do that, I think we need more interdisciplinary studies. Sometimes there is a gap. We just may not be able to do that. It's like what deciphering, like what Dr. Rajan has done is he has extensively used the graffiti to try to come, to understand why this occurs in the Iron Age context in South India. What is its meaning? Similarly, Balakrishnan, what he has done is, that is another set of study, how place name survives. So that, as I said, verticality, that kind of verticality is related to population genetics. That is one thing. As I said, people themselves are source for history, our own body and our own DNA. But that is much more complicated. We have only one sample studied at Rakigari. I said the theoretical aspect and some of the conceptual approaches we need to finalize. So your question, I will not be able to answer. We can, but we can try if you use multidisciplinary approaches at a later point.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have one last question from Mr. Balakrishnan.
So not even a question, it's an observation. I think today's this session, both the presentations have been very phenomenal. When you are answering, Selva Kumar was pointing out that the verticality versus looking at horizontally and a local culture's point of view. But most of the time, the people like non-academics like us who are venturing into this kind of area, the technical terminologies used by the academicians, actually it creates a huge problem. Instead of adding clarity, sometimes it makes the things very complex. Like, for example, when we are dealing with the BRW pottery, black and red ware pottery, there was a tendency to, wherever it's found, that is call it a megalithic pottery. Just call it megalith, matter ends. So the fact remains that BRW is found in megalith as well as non-megalith. It founds not only in South India, outside South India also. So then this kind of sweeping terminologies has created a lot of problem. That same thing holds good for the Iron Age versus Copper Age and the megalithic versus non-megalithic. So that's the reason, in spite of knowing that it's very unfair to put a pottery in a pan-Indian context, still consciously people like us did it. Like say, I need an answer that in the sense that it's not that immediately thing. Like when we find the graffiti marker and all, you mostly find in the BRW context. I don't think that it has been found in the painted graveware yet, in such a number or whichever way. So then, but it's easily people, a huge, importantly respectable scholars have make the statement like Mahabharata age. I'm not able to understand Iron Age, Copper Age, all these things. Mahabharata age, even Sangam age, like in the sense that even when people make a sweepingly a Sangam age kind of thing. So these are the sometimes the terminologies add a huge problem, and which needs, as you suggested, both of you, that we need to get clarity about the graffiti versus sign and then the verticality which you are talking about. Thank you once again, and you are a great scholar, both of you, and thanks once again for on behalf of all of us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments and observations. And thank you for all those who are sitting on the dais. It was an honor to listen to the session, please. With this, we come to the conclusion of day one. It was a day of interesting sessions and lively discussions. I have a small announcement to make. All the registered participants, we kindly request you to hand over your tags to our team members standing at the entrance, and you can collect them tomorrow. We'll all see you tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Let's make this new year faster, sexier, and bigger with the 2025G smartphone, Redmi 14C 5G.